Welcome to another episode of the Citizens of Lorcana podcast, a podcast where we invite you to be a part of their world. We're your hosts, Jared and James, and in today's episode, we're going to finish our conversation with Mark Woodin, where he shares with us how he went from casual to competitive play and some tips he learned along the way. We hope you enjoy the conversation as much as we did. All right, so I think we've really covered the news pretty well. So let's get back to the main purpose of today's podcast, which is to talk to Mark. And we've kind of gotten a taste of your background and your history, but we want to talk about a few things today. We want to take a look at how you went from casual to competitive, because I'm sure there was a point in there where you did. Then we want to take a look at your history as a competitive player. I know Kaijudo plays a big part in that, and currently One Piece is, which I know you want to talk a bit about. We'll also talk about your experience with Steve Warner and Ryan Miller, the two creators of Lorcana, and they also developed Kaijudo. So you've already shared a story with us, and maybe you don't have any more, but we'll talk about that too. And then we'll get your thoughts on the future of Lorcana, which again, we've kind of talked about, but we'll just put a bow on it at the end. So first question here. We talked about organized play last week on a local level, you know, your weekly tournaments, because that's all the experience that I have. But we wanted to talk about organized play at a higher level. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience as a competitive TCG player.
Yeah. So I mean, I pretty much started probably like a lot of other people did, you know, like I honestly no, I started with there was these things from Panini. They were like these books with these stickers, and you know, you basically just like buy these booster packs of these stickers and put them in these books. So I had like Darkwing Duck and like these video game magazines and whatever. And you know, it was a lot of fun. And I think that started, you know, where it fueled my interest in collecting. You know, eventually that ranged once I got to looking into playing like Pokemon and all this other stuff. I really didn't get into sort of the competitive nature of things until I started getting into Yu-Gi-Oh, which I played basically from launch. So like, what was that, like 2002 or somewhere in that range, 2001, 2002. Yeah. And I basically played it all the way through till I probably ended my Yu-Gi-Oh like in-person play around like 2012 or so. But like so in terms of, you know, getting into more like the competitive play of things, you know, I think that's what really got me started there. You know, there was like this one moment, like I started out, there was like a tournament where, you know, we did some things with like local friends, and it was a lot of fun. And I ended up, I'm trying to remember if I won or not. It was either I won or I lost to some ridiculous combo. But I remember afterwards too, I was just like walking around with one of my friends, and you know, I like found like a random card on the floor. I was like, this is like the video games. I picked it up. It was like an ultra rare card. I'm like, oh, this is sweet. And anyway, so from there, I just, you know, I really got into it. I enjoyed, I mean, I think a lot of us, you know, enjoy winning. I understand we can't always win, but it's fun, you know. And I know I'm jumping around here because I'm going to go on a whole nother tangent here.
No, this is an introduction to you. So share what you want.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I essentially from that point, what was that? So I went to a tournament that was like out of state, and by out of state, it was like just across the border. I grew up around you know, like northern Pennsylvania, for those of you who don't know. So I went to some place in Jamestown called, I'll plug them a little bit. I don't even know if they're still around. A place called Chautauqua Comics, and it was my first like big Yu-Gi-Oh like tournament. And by big, I'm talking like, oh, it had like, you know, 12 people or something. I don't know, 12, 15 people. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And I ended up making it to the finals, and like all of my friends that went didn't make it. I'm like, oh, okay. And I don't know if it's, at the time, this is, whatever. But like we had a Yu-Gi-Oh moment where like people were like, oh yeah, like they're like, use my card and like put it in your deck. I'm like, obviously that's not legal. But again, there wasn't like any like enforcement at the time. But I'm like, and so I ended up playing against some guy that was using Exodia, which is basically like an auto win deck if you pull all the cards. And it was so fun. It was a great time. And I think he did beat me with Exodia at one point, but I ended up like winning the match. So like from that point, I was like, I got a taste of it. It was fun. It was exciting. And then from there, I just it kind of launched me. I since then, I mean, like I said, I played in Yu-Gi-Oh. I've uh, qualified for nationals for Yu-Gi-Oh at least 5 times, 6 times, maybe. I don't know off the top of my head. Probably my biggest achievement, though, with Yu-Gi-Oh was there was like a Yu-Gi-Oh Championship Tournament series. They called them YCSs back in the day. Well, they were SJCs first, but they had YCSs, and I did really well. And I always made it a point in every game that I play and continue to play that I use my own unique decks. I don't net deck. That is very strongly one of the things that you will not see me do. Uh, it's like I like to be original. I go against the grain. I'm the dark horse, the underdog, whatever you want to call it. And I pride myself in that because I want to be different. I don't want to be like, oh yeah, people play Hearthstone like me go face. No, I I want to figure things out. I want to have that. But anyway, so I played at this event, and I did really well. Eventually got to the point where I was in the last pairing, and I played against the guy, and I beat the guy. And then he's like, well, I'm just going to drop. And I'm like, no, don't do it. And due to that reason, I got my tiebreakers a little worse. And I was like, oh, it was rough. So I ended up getting 34th. And the cutoff for day 2 was 32. Keep in mind, this is out of over 1,100 players.
Wow.
So
That's impressive.
that was a big deal for me. And I was so disheartened by it, honestly, though, because I just spent all this, like, maybe not literal blood, but like blood, sweat, and tears here, trying to go through this day because it was such a long day.
Yeah, tournaments are long.
Yeah, and that's definitely one thing you want to be ready for. You want to be prepared for. I know people, the fact that I have this is amazing. The people can't see it, but I'm holding a can of beefaroni, people. Be prepared, like Scar said, and just make it a point, because you want to make sure you're hydrated. You want to make sure that you're eating and all this other stuff. Otherwise, it's going to affect you, physically, psychologically, all that other stuff. But anyways, so I digress. The thing that was upsetting about the whole process was, for me in that situation, I didn't get any prizing. Even though I got 34th place, and all that time, everything, it was like, oh, I didn't get anything. I'm like, oh man. And I mean, I ended up playing it like some other nationals things with it. Eventually I moved on to other games, and I checked out Force of Will, which is a ton. It's actually still going right now. A lot of people think it's dead. It's not. I have a few friends that are big into the content creating for that. It's a lot of fun. They went through sort of like a rebranding phase, and some people didn't like the style changes, and things like that. Then I moved on to a few other games here and there. I played, obviously, Kaijudo. Prior to that was Duel Masters. I didn't really get into that. I bought some stuff when it first came out, but didn't get into the competitive scene with that. Although I got to have some fun with some of the players, like in the future in Kaijudo that were like well-known players, so that was cool. But yeah, so then I played all these other games, like Argent Saga was a game that was created by a game company, which is kind of neat. They ARG, or Alter Reality Games, they used to do like all these tournaments and stuff like that. So basically all the events that you would see going on for Dragon Ball Super, One Piece, things like that, they would be done by ARG if they were still doing that today. So like, I actually for a while, I actually used to do some articles for ARG and work for them. And I completely forgot about it. I need to put this on my resume here. I did cards. I did like a card of the day article on Pojo.com. Sadly, I think they just nixed all of those. I still have all the hard copies of them, but like, the articles from that, that was a lot of fun doing that. For a brief stint, I actually did some articles for Kaijudo on Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro's, whatever you want to call it, their website. So that was pretty neat as well. But I don't know. Long story short, because we all know that this isn't a short story here.
It's
I play
great.
a lot of games. I love playing games. I have an entire shelf that is just stockpile full of games. It's fun for me, and that's really what this is about. I've had so many people at different events. They're like, I mean, I do like to run control decks for those of you who don't know. So I like the long games. I like the grindy back and forth stuff.
I don't like people like you.
I'm sorry.
It's like the worst type of game to play. When I played My Hero and I saw somebody pull out one of the control players, I just groaned, rolled my eyes, and be like, whatever.
Yeah. And see, that's the thing. Like, I hate when it's like that for other people, but I'm just like, I'm here to have fun. And the thing is, like, people are over here looking at me like I'm killing puppies, and I'm like, I'm not trying to. I swear, I love puppies.
Well, you're playing a winning strategy. I acknowledge
Yeah.
that.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's sort of like the whole concept of, um, I guess perspective of life or psychology or this or that. It's like, okay, well, I want to be successful. I want to be the best, like, like good old Pokemon would say. But no, I do want to, continue to do well and do better. And again, there's times I lose, and that's okay. The idea is you learn something about it. If you're not learning, then that's part of the issue, part of the problem. But the issue, I guess, is like, if I run one of these decks, I've had people before, they're just like, oh, I scoop. You're like, oh, you got this. I'm like, you don't even want to play, like, or do anything like that. And that's a little disheartening there, which I can tangent into a very quick story, very quick. Okay. So there was a time I went to college, Edinburgh, shout out there. And one of the selling points of this was that they had a card store like right there. And obviously education's important, but I was like, hey, I want to play cards. So I would go there, and it was always so much fun for me. I like, it was like Saturday tournaments, like around like noon or something like that. One time I had to, I was late, and I had to literally figure a way to like run around and bypass a parade that was happening around homecoming. I'm like, come on.
Of course.
But anyway, so I go to the store and I play Yu-Gi-Oh! And the people at the store, they're like, they didn't abide by the ban restriction list, and but I did. I'm like, okay, well, look, I'm gonna follow this, because I'm preparing, I'm training for regionals, I'm training for the future here, and I want to be as accurate with my plays as possible. And again, I had a situation happen where I was winning, and I was winning frequently, and I'm really not trying to toot my own horn here, but like, it got to the point where they literally, they had a wall of like people that won, and there was like, on the sheets of paper, it was just my name repeating unless I wasn't there for the weekend. And then at that point, I came in one week, and the owner's son basically told me, he's like, you can't play.
Wow.
And I seriously, I was like, wait, what? I felt like I was so unfair, because I'm trying to follow these rules and stuff like that, but I'm also trying to win, I'm trying to, and that was really, 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 really sad, because like, again, I play these, yes, because I do like to win. I get that. But like, I enjoy it. I have fun, like I just want to play these games. I could do this literally all day. I could stay up till, and I have done this before in the past with like my brother. We used to play Yu-Gi-Oh together, and I would stay up. There was one night till like 7 a.m. It was like we played straight through the entire night. We're just playing, like nonstop. um and it's because I love the games, and I really want to include Lorcana into that, um and I don't know, I'm excited, I'm hopeful, and yeah.
Same.
So it sounds like basically the decision to play competitively was just like a natural progression for you from, with the desire to win.
Yeah.
It's like, I just want to keep seeing how much winning I can do.
Yeah.
So it doesn't sound like it wasn't even really difficult to go from just playing at the local store to the tournaments.
No, I mean, it really was. It was sort of like a natural thing. Like I just played, and it's one of those things, like, I just, I wanted, and that's the thing, I wanted a challenge, like if I'm not struggling, there's at times where I feel like I'm not growing, like, oh, okay, well, if I'm just winning every week, like, what is that doing for me? Okay, well, what can I do differently, or what can I do to, up my game? Well, perhaps I need to, expand my play group, or, things like that, or like I do some fun games with people, like, oh yeah, let's play like 2-on-1 or something, and sometimes it works, sometimes it wouldn't, but
It's interesting that you should bring that up, because our very next question was, what would you say is the biggest difference in mindset in a casual player versus a competitive player? So listening to you speak just there, you were like, I'm constantly asking myself, how can I improve? How can I get better? I've listened to people say after every match, they have a notebook and they'll write down like the turning point, or they'll ask their opponent, like, when did you feel like you won the game? Or when did you feel like you lost the game? Whatever the case may be. What else sticks in your mind about what the difference between a casual and a competitive player is as far as mindset?
Well, first of all, those people, and huge shout out to all you out there that are listening right now. If you are writing things down, if you are actually looking for like personal like growth and development, you will have it. Like you have to recognize that we're not perfect, and we are going to mess up, we're going to misplay. Like, I have a friend who just actually vouched for me on one of my other things, and he would always say, it's like, oh, it's like, he always kicks my butt, he always wins, he always does this. I'm like, but I don't. There have been times where you've beaten me. It's just they focus on, like, okay, well, they just, the majority of what they've experienced. But like the people that look at the notes, the people that are like, okay, well, what did I do wrong? What can I do better? What can I improve on? Those are the people that you will see at the top tables, as long as they are in like applying themselves. I think the biggest difference between casual and competitive is that a casual person, they're here to have fun, which again, competitive people can do too. But casual person doesn't really, doesn't necessarily care as much about, like, oh yeah, I gotta get ready for regionals, I gotta get ready for nationals. I need to have every card, every play set, things like that. A competitive person is like, obviously they're putting more time into this. Maybe they're looking at websites and like, hey, I need to see what people are running. I need to see, like what the top decks are, maybe even card count, card ratios, just what does the meta look like, and stuff like that. Like, competitive players have to stay more active. It can be, for some of them out there, it can be a full-time job if they really, devote themselves enough to it. But with that being said, again, make sure you got that can of beef running. Don't burn yourself out, people. You want to take it easy. You got to have breathers. If you are, eat, breathing, sleeping Lorcana, it's going to catch up to you, and
My first experience at a regional tournament, it was in Pasadena, California for My Hero Academia. And I didn't realize going in just how long these were going to be.
Yeah.
And I think it was a 6 or 7 round match. And after round 3, I was just so mentally exhausted. I was like, I can't go on. It was a serious struggle. So
Yeah.
like you say, going into that, practicing it, knowing what to expect is going to be a huge thing.
Yeah, and it'll allow you the opportunity to not feel as stressed out about things, etc. Speaking of long events, probably the longest, most grueling one that I've ever done. I went to a place in Canada. Was it? No, that's Hamilton. Yeah, it was like Hamilton in, like, I think Ontario. And I had stayed the night with some of these players, and I was like geeking out because some of these were like, oh, like world championship level players. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And I didn't get a whole lot of sleep. And then we had to drive basically in the morning to go from this place in New York, so around Buffalo, to the rest of the way to Hamilton. And it was straight through, like I had never driven this before. I was already running low on sleep. I probably didn't eat, probably didn't, drink a lot of, fluids. And this event was at least 9 rounds. And man, I was done after this. But the thing is, I couldn't be, because guess what? I had to drive all the way back home, which was like a 3-4 hour drive. And it didn't help my friend at the time. They fell asleep. So I'm over here like struggling, like, look, don't do that, guys. If you need to get a hotel, or if you need to take a breather, you need to take a break, do it, because you're going to end up like going off the road or hitting a deer, or something worse. Like, the only deer we should be hitting is Bambi's.
That's terrible.
I know. I know.
So you've already offered the beefaroni and the don't play tired. What are some other things, or one significant thing that you know now in organized play that you wish you had known from the beginning?
Honestly, probably the biggest difference is just the access to technology that we have now. When I first started into this stuff, like, the internet was, was very new. Like, I mean, it wasn't reliable. Like, I remember sitting at school, like busting out my PSP trying to connect to the Wi-Fi. I'm like, oh, maybe I can look at this site today. I had the dial-up tone in my head, nonstop. Yeah, I mean, we didn't have the technology we have today, and because of that, you had to do a lot more either research or play testing, or if you go to a bunch of different tournaments, you maybe hope that that's the kind of environment you're going to come against. But the thing is, like, back then you couldn't really prepare as much. I went down to this tournament in it was in New Jersey at one point, and basically in that moment, somebody brought this whole new deck type that nobody had ever seen. And that's where goat control, for those Yu-Gi-Oh listeners here, that's where it spawned. It was like, I had no idea how to combat it. I was trying to beat it the best I could, and it was just no. But with that being said, technology, utilize it, look into it. For like different games, they're going to have, these people putting these things together, like websites, resources. Use them to the best of your ability. Talk to people. Like, look, we may not agree on different types of play or styles or the future of Lorcana, etc., but that's okay. That's one of the reasons we're here, is to talk about our differences. To talk about, and like, maybe we can learn something from each other. Maybe we can grow and things like that. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, another thing that has helped me when I got into My Hero was there are a lot of players, including top players, that will stream on Twitch, and they'll stream either like their cards and their opponent is streaming their cards, or they'll stream on tabletop service or something like that. My one wish though is that you could see their hand, because if you're able to see their hand and then you saw how they play, you could be like, okay, they had their hand and they made this play. This is why they made it. But just being able to watch some of the top players play was huge. And a lot of times they're giving their stream of consciousness, like, this is why I did this, this is why I did that. Having that level of analysis was super helpful for me. And I'm not here to say that I ever got really good at My Hero. So, but for me as a new player, that's something that I took a lot in. And you can pretty much get unlimited amount of streams. And I'm sure Lorcana will be the same way. There are people all the time saying, I plan on streaming Lorcana. So one of the things I wanted to ask you, Mark, is you have a very busy life between working, you have a family, including a child, right?
Yeah, last I checked.
How do you fit in? And now, and we're going to talk about this later, but you just even became certified to be a coach for the One Piece on Medify. I think that's how you pronounce it. So how do you fit in the time to stay competitive? How do you fit in the time to play?
Yeah. So first of all, just a clarification here. So I am in the process right now on Medify to basically be
Okay.
approved. So I'm being reviewed right now. It's actually, the whole situation is really funny, but like, but that's a whole other side thing. But no, the thing is, I mean, there's a lot going on. And I make it a point, the same way with the beefaroni there, you have to set time aside to do something for yourself. You have to make sure you're doing something for yourself, because if you don't, you get to the point where you're burnout, or you're exhausted, or you get frustrated, or things like that. You need some me time, and that's okay. So what I'll do, I make it a point, I talk with my wife. That's a big thing, and I say that for anybody that's in a relationship here. Communication's key. If you want to do something, talk about it, communicate about it. I understand, obviously, my son, he usually goes to bed between, lately it's been different, but like, about 8:30ish is usually his bedtime. So, anytime after that, I'm good to go. But there's other things happening, like, okay, well, this is a great time to spend time with my wife, or if I had paperwork or something like that I need to do. Because again, I work a full-time job too. And it really is just about trying to find the balance between it all. But communication is a big part of it. I encourage her to. I'm like, hey, if you want to go do something, go do it. It's like, I'm more than willing to watch the kiddo while you go do this or that. It really is. There's obviously, compromise and everything. But more or less, just talk about it, communicate, figure things out, make a schedule, make a plan. And yeah, I mean, like I said, typically for me right now, if I were to do One Piece, they have events firing off at one of my, I guess you can call them locals, on Friday nights. So it's basically like, okay, well, I'll head out there Friday night. And I mean, by that point, maybe you'll have, like my wife, or maybe my mom stop out and help out, if needed. But I'll go out and then play, and then I sort of get a little bit of my fix in. Or you can take some time and obviously use this thing called Discord. It's been super handy. I picked up a right before Digimon Nationals, I had picked up like a new camera, and so I could basically position it so I could see my hand. And
Yeah.
So my opponents could see my hand, right? No, so you could see like my cards. And anyways, but yeah, being able to play on there is great. If you have Tabletop Simulator, that's also another great thing. Some of my friends and colleagues, they have this other thing they use called Cockatrice. That's, you can use Magic or Kaijudo, and you can play this, and you can watch your replays at a future time and see the hands and all this other stuff. So yeah, it really is just about trying to find a balance with things, making it a point to schedule things, even if it's just once a week. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
The nice thing about like Discord, when I was playing My Hero, because it's people from all around the world. So I'm a morning person. I usually get up between 4 and 5 in the morning.
Oh,
But there are people at somewhere around the world who are up at that time, so I could get a game in at that time. But I know
yeah.
not everybody's like me. So
Well, okay. So I'm trying to do the math here. I'm like, you're like, oh, 4 or 5 in the morning. I'm like, what time is that over here? I'm like, oh man. Um,
yeah, I am not a
anyways,
night person. I
I,
struggle.
I'm the I'm the other way around here. I will sit here and I'll be up till 1, 2, maybe later, depending on how down the rabbit hole I go with either my games I play or whatever. Um, but mornings, whew, no, thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to the next part where we talk about preparing for tournaments and a year experience with competitive play, which we've covered a lot of. I don't think something we've asked is how do you prepare for a big tournament? So, assuming you've practiced and you have all the preparations, what do you do to prepare for a big tournament?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it kind of gets into the stuff we've kind of mentioned. Just making sure that you have everything good to go. You want to make sure, like, if it's a large tournament, that's one thing. If you're talking like locals, just more or less just make sure you're comfortable with whatever deck that you're using. So that way when it comes time to play, you're not like making misplays left and right or having to read all of your cards. Like, you should be able to recognize what a card is and what a card does just by looking at it. If you're not at that point, it doesn't mean that you're a bad player, but it does mean you need to maybe take some more time to get more comfortable with that deck.
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest with you, I personally believe that you are going to do better with a deck you're more comfortable with than a deck you've never seen a day in your life. And you're going to fall into some pitfalls here. You're like, I mean, you could have the best cards, for sure, but if you don't know how to play those cards right, like Yu-Gi-Oh people over here, like, oh, what's this pot of gray delinquent duo graceful charity? Let me just play the graceful charity, draw these cards, and let me discard the pot of greed and discard this. Like, like, you can have the cards, but it comes down to the knowledge and the understanding. So that's what I would say. I mean, you really just need to be ready and be prepared for that in that way. If you know kind of what the meta is, like I mentioned earlier, that's a key point too. Like, look around, like, look in the sites, look at what people are playing. If you've seen tournaments happening, keep track of that stuff. See what's in the top tables, like, every time. See, like, is there something different here? Is this the same? Is there a pattern? Like, oh, okay, well, like, even in like One Piece right now, it's like there's still a variety of decks that people are running, but hey, red's a good color right now, if you like to smash face and stuff. But that's not what I do, and that's the thing too, that again kind of puts me back to that difference is, I don't want to say I'm a one deck pony or one trick pony like type of thing, but I do like my pet decks. In Kaijudo, it was the Queen Kalima deck, and basically it was like an all purple and yellow deck. So it was like, if the colors are similar, you'll see me using that stuff. But I love destruction effects and discarding cards and all the stuff like that. And that's what that deck did. And it solved a big problem in the meta. And that's actually, there was one day, and another tangent, I'm sorry, there was one day at a tournament, one of the best players in the game, good old Bobby Break, he was running this deck, and I have a picture of this. It is so ridiculous, I'll show you guys later. But he literally had a full board of all these creatures, and these creatures were ginormous. Basically in Lorcana, think of it like, okay, they were like, Maleficent. Every card was Maleficent. Like, they were giant. And they basically said, you can't target me. So there was no way to destroy them through natural means. It's just like, okay. So I looked at that board state. I'm like, okay, well, how do you deal with this? And I remembered, the people created this other card that says basically, hey, play this card. You reveal the top 3 cards of your deck. If they're all purple, your opponent has to sacrifice a card for each purple card that's revealed. So they have to sacrifice basically up to 3 cards. And if all they had were those 3, like those 3 cards were those big boys on the board, they had to get rid of them, because even though they couldn't be targeted, they could still be sacrificed by that player. So that sort of spawned this whole thing. And like it got to the point where people were at one point net decking me. It was very surreal, kind of getting to that point, like people are actually net decking me. Or like one of the other biggest things was somebody came up to me one time, and one of the cards in the deck that I'd used was called, ironically, Mark of Kalima. And so they're like, hey, can you sign this for me? I'm like, what? Like, you want me to sign a card for you? I'm like, wow, this is really kind of cool. So then I started carrying around Sharpies with me, because they weren't the only ones.
Well, I remember in one of our conversations, and for those of you who don't know what the term net deck means, it means you go online and find a deck list of a deck that somebody's run at a tournament that's won, or is a real meta type deck. But in one of the conversations we had offline, you said that you had built a deck, and the very next day somebody net decked you. So is this the experience that you're talking about?
Yes and no. People net decked my deck in more than one occasion. But there was the one instance where I had won an event. This was the one in Monroeville. So I just won this championship event. I don't know, like all these things blur together, honestly. But like, so I'd won this event. The next day, some guy comes over here and I'm playing him, and he charges, or he puts a mana in his mana zone, whatever you want to call it. And I'm like, hey, that looks familiar. And he literally tells me, he's like, oh man, he's like, I'm using your deck from yesterday. Because they published the information, like, at the end of the event. I'm like, oh, well, thankfully in that situation I had made some adjustments to my deck, and I made some slight altercations. I'm like, let me try this, let me do this, and I was able to come out on top of that. But it was really cool to see like that people like the deck so much that they're like, I'm going to take this, I'm going to try to win with this. And it was very flattering, like, not that I need all this stuff to go to my head, I really don't, but like, it was pretty cool. And there were other people that started running, the Kalima decks, and it really took off. And I feel like the nice sort of like final farewell to like that whole situation was, again, that in the finals, I was able to take that deck there. Every deck in the top 8 was either an aggro deck or some kind of tempo deck or rush deck or something like that. Mine was like literally the only control deck in there. And
Nice.
I had to gruel through all these rounds and all this other stuff. But that's the thing. Like, I will use a deck, and I will find ways to make it better so that it can adapt to the meta, because I like it. Not because it's necessarily the best deck. Sometimes I have to make adjustments for the meta, sure. But I like playing my cards. Like, for example, if I like Aladdin, I'm going to run Aladdin. But I don't know, it has to have the flavor too, but yeah.
So when you're at one of these tournaments, like currently you're playing One Piece, as you mentioned. I mean, you've already talked about like kind of like preparing and all that, but what is like the process of going through the tournament? Like, what's the steps you do as you go through the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, like once you're at the tournament, I mean, you obviously make sure you register ahead of time. It just makes it easier for everybody. And that way you don't have to like scramble to do this stuff. I'm not the perfect person whenever it comes to like, in one of these events, they're like, oh, you need a deck list for this. I'm like, oh, that's another thing I'd encourage people. If you need a deck list at an event, do it beforehand. Be comfortable, be confident with yourself, make sure you have that set up. I'm very I have a habit of holding off on that, because I'm always like, oh, but what if I change this card, or what if I use this? I'm like, I don't like the finality of a deck list, come on. But but yeah, so I mean, if that's a thing, otherwise, you go in there, again, mindset of, look, try to have fun with this, be a good sport. If the person doesn't want to shake your hand or say GG or this or that, that's fine. Look, be respectful. But talk with them. I mean, this is meant to be a fun thing. I'm not going to sit here with like these blinders on, like I'm playing against myself today. No, like, but yeah, I mean, talk with them, have fun. Probably one of the big things is, and I've had this happen, and I've had it be relevant. And here's a little tidbit of knowledge that I feel like can go a long way. Is even if you've lost, by all intents and purposes, I'm in the mindset of don't give up. And there are people that will be like, oh no, you should scoop and just move on to the next game. You could, if you really want to, if like, look, I need to try to finish this game out as quickly as possible, for a chance, because there's no way I'm going to win this one at the state I'm in. Okay. But what I'm trying to say is, like, if you're in a situation and your opponent knows that you've given up, then you've lost. But if you are standing there, you're sitting there, and in your mind, you're like, oh no, like, I'm done. This guy's got me. But you don't let that show. You got to pull an Elsa here. And with that being said, it's like, okay, well, if they don't know that you're going to lose, then they change their mind. They change their strategy. And maybe because I left up so much mana or Dawn or whatever, they think I have certain cards in my hand that I don't. Like, it really is like the poker mentality. It's like, okay, well, am I bluffing? Am I not? But at the end of the day, I'm going to keep the poker face on, because look, I need to remain confident, because that is an opportunity. I could end up losing, but it's a could. It's different from I'm absolutely losing. So, and it has mattered. It literally has mattered. I have played games and I legitimately, I should have lost if they would have seen the play, or if they would have maybe even thought just a little bit differently. I should have by all means lost. But because they played differently, I was able to come out on top and win that game. And then, either, win or get the top positions in these tournaments. I like, again, I mean, in terms of One Piece right now, I think the largest one we've played in, we had like 25 or so players, which again is decent size for a local, for sure. But like, we haven't really gotten to that point of like these large scale events just yet. But as time goes on, it really comes down to the same process, and you have to be like mentally prepared for this kind of stuff. If you've never played more than 7 rounds, you got to be ready for that. Like, you need to make sure your body and your mind are taken care of. But anyways, that's sort of like my mindset when it comes into these games here.
No, that's great. Thank you. I was going to ask you to share a highlight from your competitive play. You've shared a lot with us. So what I want to ask you instead is, what does it feel like when you win a tournament? What is that feeling when you know that you have the winning play in your hand?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, I don't know. I mean, I would like to say that, everybody knows that feeling. But I understand that maybe some people don't, and I don't know. I mean, it's a really, really good feeling. It's not the only reason, obviously, but it is one of the reasons I continue to play, is like, look, it's exciting. It's like, oh, all my work paid off, or like, I feel good about myself. It's a little bit of a self-esteem boost.
So like a rush? Are you giddy?
All of the above. I mean, I'm not sitting here necessarily trying to flaunt it or things like that, but I do like to share it with some people. It was like after the One Piece event, I was like, I messaged you. I'm like, hey man, yeah, I got this. I'm like, it was exciting. I want to, like, share that with people. I want to enjoy the game, and that's a part of that. And I understand, again, look, I don't win every time. I don't top every single time. Although if you play well, you should do rather well overall. But yeah, it's just exciting. It's fun. It's like you feel good about yourself. You want to play more. It's honestly, I mean, get into the psychology of it. It's that dopamine hit. You get a little bit of reward, for doing something. You want to do it again. It's just, that's how the mind works.
Absolutely. So I think you shared with Jared offline that you were a beta tester for Kaijudo, and
Yeah,
which was pretty cool.
yeah.
Can you share with us how that happened and what was like being like inside the game that you eventually like were already a part of?
Yeah, sure. So I mean, I don't, just to be clear, like we say beta tester. So I wasn't like one of the original. Like the game had already come out.
Right.
And basically, the Wizards of the Coast at the time, they and this is exactly what Lorcana is doing right now. So like, hey, look forward to maybe something like this. They keep a very close eye on everything. Like I joke around, like they posting like the memes of like, we're always watching, or things like that. They really are. Like everything that we're doing, we're posting about on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Insta, all that stuff. They're watching. So definitely be aware of that, like, be aware. Like, okay. With that being said, one of the cool things about it is they were sort of keeping an eye on me and my interactions. And at one point I had taken a trip down, I live in Pennsylvania. I had taken a trip down to Texas for one of the championship events in that area. And so I was like one of the people that had traveled the furthest to this. I normally don't take planes to fly for card games, unless, you know, but so I went down there and I played in this event, and unfortunately I had one of those sad moments again where I basically, I was in the top cut. I was literally, I think it was like in second or third place. And then the last round I lost and I got pushed to ninth. And that was like super unfortunate because again, I was on my Kalima deck, and anyways, so I was like really bummed about that. But then they're like, they called up some people. They're like, hey, yeah, we basically give out these awards to people for being, positive members and pillars of the community. And they basically gave us, I still have this stuff now, but like they gave us this big art print and it had all of the R&D people. They had signed this. It's super sweet. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. Also interesting to note that, Ryan Miller's signature has changed since those days. So just throwing that out there. But with that being said, they also gave me an iPad. So that was cool. So everyone's telling me like, oh, you already won this thing. And like, even though you didn't win, you won. So yeah, it was really cool. And then fast forward a little while later, I basically get an email or a notification, and I get connected with like the brand people, the managers and all this other stuff. And they're like, hey, yeah, we want to do a call with you and some of the other guys here. And so they got us on this call, and they basically told us like, hey, we want you to fly out to Wizards of the Coast headquarters. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, are you serious? Like, and they're basically saying like, hey, you know what? Yeah, we basically, they've been keeping an eye on things, and they want to basically have an entire weekend with us where it's like, hey, we want to show you the game. We want to talk to you about the game. We want to play tests. We want to, everything. And they're like, you know what? We just basically need this information. Obviously, you're going to sign an NDA, so you're not going to talk about things, and so on and so forth. And I was so on board. I was so psyched. I'm like, I have to figure things out with work. I need to get this time off. So we ended up flying out there. They covered everything. They covered the flight. They covered the hotel. They covered our meals. Wow. Like literally everything. And it wasn't like, they're no offense to Spirit, but you know, I mean, they gave us a really good airline, you know, like it was like, you know, it had TVs I could watch and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, this is cool. So yeah, you know, like Jared, like be ready, because you know, they might be coming for you.
We'll
But anyway, so we went out there and, you know, we got picked up, and you know, they did the introductions, and, you know, by the time we got settled in, it was like, we have to basically get around for bed, whatever. But so the next day, like bright and early, we got up, we went over, you know, like numbers of stuff. We talked about like how the game's doing. Unfortunately, you know, apparently we didn't have the right numbers that we were looking for, because the game later on, late to that year, ended up like, you know, its final days. But with that being said, you know, we got to test the game. There was like, again, sets that they had just been working on. They had shown us like some of these like really powerful cards that were coming out in like you know, 5 months from now, 6 months from now. And one of the biggest things they told us at the time, we were switching to a rotation format. So that was kind of a big deal. So they basically said, hey, yeah, we're going to reprint all this stuff. We're changing the pack size. You know, we went from 12 cards up to, you know, 15. So they had draft in mind with this. I don't think Lorcana's going that route just yet, but we'll see. Especially since I don't know, the whole resource system, but, and I digress. So yeah, we got to literally sit down at this big giant table. You know, it was like, I don't know, it was really cool. So big giant table, they gave us these cards, and these cards had these stickers on them. So they didn't have the finalized versions of things, but they had the stickers and they had the effects on these things. I'm reading these things, I'm like trying to keep up. And they obviously they had their inside joke terms and things like that for certain names of cards. And you know, like there was like in a card, one of the cards in the game was called Giga Stand. And back in the day, it was like, oh, it attacks, you discard a card. Well, they're like, oh, this does something similar, but it's bigger, so let's call it Giga Sit. You know, so like they have their little cute like pet names of cards before they come out to development. And so I mean that was a thing. But like at one point, I looked at a card that I had that they had given me to play with, and I'm like, you're literally just put a sticker on top of my favorite card. Like it's just, it's like it's foiled out and everything. Like, oh yeah, no, it's just a giant sticker on there. It's like it's expendable.
No
we
big
have
deal.
tons of them. No big deal. No big deal. But you know, being able to see, you know, kind of the future of the game, even for, you know, the amount of time we had it, it was really, really cool. We got to try different formats of things that they were going to be releasing. There's actually a video still up actually on YouTube about sort of my experience with it, where we talked about you know, like introducing booster draft and booster brawl and all this other stuff. And one of the guys there from R&D actually they put my face on like one of their, they did like a sales pitch or something like that, and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna put this here and I'm gonna use this on my portfolio. I'm like, okay.
Sweet.
I guess I signed that part in the NDA. I don't even know. But yeah, so I went there. I did meet Steve Warner at that point. Ryan Miller actually wasn't there at that time, but I did, you know, have future interactions with him. And just for general purpose and knowledge here, if you guys haven't talked with, you know, Ryan, he is a great guy. He's super funny. He actually for a while had his own comedy troupe that he was involved in. And like he was, I think that weekend he was actually like performing there or something, but not at Wizards of the Coast, but his own place.
So what was that like? Like what was your, I mean, you have a favorable impression of Ryan, but is there any story that sticks out to you? Any interaction with Steve or Ryan?
Well, I mean, just in general, I mean, these guys, they're well, Ryan specifically was definitely a hoot. Like, I mean, he he's the type of guy that was like the, you know, the life of the party, you know, like for those of you who don't know, like seriously, type in I don't know, like Ryan Miller Kaijudo reveal or something like that, or go to Wizards Kaijudo or something on YouTube, and he does these reveals, and he's so much energy, and he's a big guy too, like to contain all that energy. He's like 6'4", 6'5" or something. But anyways, like Steve Warner, I mean, he's from my experience, I mean, he's definitely a little bit of a, you know, quieter individual, but you know, he was one of the people, and I make it a point to note this. He was one of the people that designed and created probably one of the most broken cards in the Kaijudo game. So be ready, people, Lorcana.
Noted.
And I mean, honestly, I mean, it was a really solid card. The card basically said, you play this card, it costs like 9, so it was hefty at that point. But it cost 9, and when you played it, you gained 2 shields, so you gained 2 life back. And again, like I mentioned earlier, if you have life, that can be more resources and more effects because you can trigger them off your attacks. And on top of that too, when somebody would go to attack you, they had to tap one of their other creatures, or in this case, exerts, or, you know, things like that. We all went out to dinner. You know, we had multiple meals. At one point, there was this big giant like brownie cake thing that we had, and there's like this giant thing of ice cream on top of it, looked like a snowman. You know, and I don't know, it was just, it really was, the whole experience was amazing. You know, there's not one specific thing that I can really, you know, like key up to them specifically, but it was a lot of fun. You know, and they had a few people there at like the R&D place that they snuck into like the show at one point, because they had Kaijudo had a TV show, and there was one guy, I think his name was Carl Spang or Span, and he did a voice for one of the characters, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of neat. I got like a card from him, and yeah. And then as time progressed too, you know, aside from this, they would bring some of the artists to like national events. So they would bring them there. You could get their artwork, you could get them to commission stuff for you there potentially. You get them to sign your stuff. So that was, you know, that was also pretty cool. But you know, we got to leave with a lot of swag. I got a you know, it's floating around here somewhere. I got an art of like my specific card. One of the other guys got basically a meme card. Giant
that's what I'll be getting.
Crab.
That's interesting.
It was an amazing opportunity. It really was, like, in terms of like highlights of not only, you know, like my card game career, but like life career, you know, like there's obviously the birth of my son, there was me getting married, Kaijudo, and not necessarily in those orders. I kid, but no, I mean, seriously, it was amazing. I could stay there. I could just do play testing all day, you know, talk about things. I know one of the, I'm not sure if it was Cassidy or not, but like one of them posted on Twitter, they're like, oh yeah, you know, play card games, they said, you know, do this, you know, it'll be fun, they said. I mean, look, I know there's paperwork and I know there's like things you have to keep hush hush, but like it's a lot of fun, you know. My little sample of it was amazing. If I could get into that kind of stuff, I would.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that the creation of a thing is, you know, if you're involved in that, there's especially something you enjoy and have a passion for, doesn't sound like work. Even if there is paperwork.
I've actually, a complete side note, I was working on creating my own card game. It's a process. It really is. It's sort of like right now I'm trying to get things in design in terms of like, you know, like trying to do the art and all. Like, I'm not an artist, you know, so I'm probably going to have to at some point shell out like all this money to figure all that out. But you know, I've made over a couple hundred cards for this game, and it's just, I don't know, it's just like creating the stuff, you know, being involved in that. It's awesome. It really is.
So we're going to bring this all the way back around to Lorcana, and we could probably do many more hours on Lorcana theories, but generally speaking, what are your thoughts on Lorcana?
Um, well, I mean, I'm definitely excited about it, and there's a part of me that's like, well, I still don't know what to think about it because we really don't know everything. It's really up in the air. And I will say this, I feel like no matter what, it's definitely going to be a game that I'm interested in because first of all, it's a card game, it's collectible, and I mean, you know, Ravensburger, whatever you want to say it. I mean, I enjoy their games. I definitely enjoy like the villainous games, and things like that. And they have this one game that's really difficult. It's like a puzzle. It is a puzzle. Never mind. But no, no, seriously, I love their stuff. So like, no matter what, I think this game is going to continue to be around for a while. Um, I I'm really hopeful that the game mechanics are solid and they're fun and they're enjoyable, and if I want to play a control deck that I can, um so that one day I can sit across the table from Jared over here, and hopefully not make him quit. um
But at least make them cry a little bit, right?
I mean, as
A
long as they're
little.
good tears.
No, no, no. I'll be better spirits about it. So, I mean, you kind of touched on this a little bit already, but we were thinking about what Lorcana has to do to survive long term. You talked about unique game mechanics. It has to do something to set itself apart from the big three. But what else do you think Lorcana has to do to be the next Magic or Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the big thing here, obviously is marketing. I've seen so many situations with other games where they failed because of the lack of marketing. Kaijudo being one of them. Kaijudo came out, they had a really, really cheesy, like commercial, and you can still watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, I've
A
seen it.
couple, I say a couple kids around a table like, um,
Well, and the
I mean,
Kaijudo anime wasn't especially popular here in America either. I don't think that helped.
no,
The
no.
the
So
Disney IP is super strong.
yeah, it definitely is. Now with I'm jumping back just a little bit to as a counterpoint here. With Kaijudo and the TV show they came out with, yes, that's getting some advertising out there for the name Kaijudo. But the problem with that is they didn't, like connect that to the card game in any way. They weren't like, oh, at the beginning or at the end or something like, hey, we have a card game, come check this out. Or check out more information on this website. Like there was none of that. And to make things worse, they basically put it on a network, the hub, which not a lot of people had access to. And I'll be honest with you, I don't even know if like I have access to it right now.
This might be
Like
the first time I've heard of it.
exactly. But see, the Disney, I mean, they've got a lot going for them. Now, to be very clear, this is Disney Lorcana. However, this is still, Ravensburger,
Yeah.
doing this. So, much like Wizards of the Coast brought us Kaijudo, it's Hasbro that's sort of pulling the strings in a roundabout way, though, in terms of like, what they say is going to be going. At least that's my understanding. Because like with Kaijudo, Wizards had wanted the game to continue, but my understanding is Hasbro was like, no, you're not meeting the quota, you're not meeting our expectations, our standards, so we have to basically count our losses. And I will say this: they did a lot for the community, and it was amazing. I didn't even talk about this, but if they had these events called KMCs, and if you won a KMC, you got an invite. But for some of these events, they didn't just do that. They're like, hey, we're going to give you a flight. Not only, and on top of this too, like, okay, so they give me a flight basically. So one national type event was in Washington. Another one was in, they did two in Washington. There was one in Texas, and then there was one in Rhode Island. So they flew people here. And at one point, there was some guy who went on vacation and was in Ireland. They flew him from Ireland to Washington, or something like that. I'm like, they're fronting like a grand or two of a bill here. but they also gave some really cool things. I know the viewers can't see this, but they gave us these really sweet like messenger bags.
Nice.
If you want to have an idea of what they look like, people listening, just type in Timbuktu messenger bag, and you kind of have an idea. But they were super sweet,
Sweet.
like they gave out all this other swag. Like I have like a hat of each color, like different civilizations for Kaijudo. They gave out patches if you wanted to like put things on you or other people, I don't know. Like they gave out deck boxes and things like that, and sleeves, etc. There was so much cool stuff. And then they gave out art. Like there was, and I really hope that they do this for this game. But they had, on the big events, they had a thing called a prize wall. And I think Magic did this as well at one point, but I actually think they took this from Kaijudo. And they basically, you went to the event, if you won different things throughout the day, you got points, and you could cash these points in throughout the day to get, again, art or product or,
Well, that's
different
cool.
items. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And, like just seeing like, okay, what am I going to get? Like, oh, they have a starter deck there. I need one of those. Or you're like, oh yeah, they've got this giant card, like literally, it's as tall as I am, or I'm exaggerating. It was it was probably like 3 or 4 feet tall. But it was a full giant size card. So, like you think Hades is big now, just wait.
We had mentioned this at the beginning, how you're going through the certification process to train for to be a trainer for One Piece. And so just so people have that link, because hopefully by the time this goes live on Friday, you'll
Okay,
be
cool.
through that process. So it's Metafy, metafy.gg/@Reijinku. Is that how you say it?
So it's, think of it kind of like almost like a French type thing, like Raijin,
Oh,
Jin, the
Raijinku.
Jin,
Okay.
Raijinku.
Raijinku. Rajinku. Okay.
You're
Well,
you're
I've been
you're
saying
not
it
the only
wrong this
person,
whole
man.
time. It's
It's
like with
okay.
knives. I thought his name was Neves until I heard him say
Well,
knives.
he didn't have the K there, so
Right?
I mean, that's what you get when you're a pigeon putting in your name into like the tablet. Like, oh yeah.
Anyway, we sure do appreciate you coming on and sharing. Man, you had so many cool stories, and it's just been fun to hear all of them.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
it's fun to talk about them and relive them again,
yeah, as
Yeah.
someone who hasn't played a trading card game in over 20 years now. I mean, my last trading card game was Marvel Overpower and Babylon 5, and I think a little bit of Dune, which was
Okay.
late 90s.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice hearing about all the, I mean, so many games, and hearing all the stories about stuff. And I'm hoping to have some fun doing the same thing coming up with Lorcana.
If you liked what you heard, click like, subscribe, and you can follow me on Twitter at Citizens of Lorcana. And of course, you can subscribe to this podcast. James, where can they find you?
You can find me everywhere at Dan Regal, or check out geekshotphoto.com for links for social media and everything for my wife and I. And Mark, where can we find you online?
Well, I mean, I do have a YouTube. You just type in Raijinku, which I know is so fun to spell, Raijinku, or just type in Mark Woodin, Woodin. And you can probably find me that way too. But Raijinku is my handle basically for all online platforms. So if you ever see that name, it is me, because there's nobody else that has that tag.
Right. So everybody have a great evening.
Yes, and we'll see you next time.